Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last session of the Scope 3 days that we've been hosting this week within WBCSD's PACT. We're going to give a few more minutes for everyone to join, but great to see already over 100 of you in a few seconds joining the session. So we'll give it a few more seconds and then we'll kick off. All right, maybe whilst everyone joins, what we're going to be doing just now is introduce ourselves. So as you can see, I am joined by my colleague Beth. Both of us are working in the PACT team, the Partnership for Carbon Transparency, which you all surely know about by now. And the focus of today's session, as we will be going through in a couple of slides, is really to take all of the insights that have been shared and that we've all learned over the last 2 days, from setting the scene to understanding what the challenges are, to understanding that the challenges can be and are being solved, obviously with the help of collaboration. And what we want to do today is really give that inspiration for everyone joining that these challenges are being solved and give you the solutions that are needed to solve the Scope 3 challenges and unlock decarbonization. So for this purpose, as I mentioned, I am joined by my colleague Beth, who will introduce herself in a second. I'll introduce myself first. So I'm a manager within WBCSD, working primarily on the methodology side of things within the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. And over to you, Beth.
Thanks, Cecilia. Nice to see all of you. I'm Beth, and I'm working on the technology side of PACT.
Thank you very much, Beth. And so before we begin, we'll do the usual bits of housekeeping. I think I will manage to say this before someone asks on the chat, but the session is being recorded. So you will be receiving the information to be able to access the slides and, of course, the discussions that will take place across the session, along the session. But we want to remind everyone that we want to ensure that we're respectful in all of the interactions that will be taking place today. But you're, of course, still able to ask any question that you may have using the Q&A functionality that you should see at the bottom of your screens. You have been muted to make sure that the session runs smoothly, but as I mentioned, you're able to ask any questions that you want. You're also able to upvote any questions that you consider essential for us to answer, and we'll try and answer as many of them as possible throughout today's session. So I've already shared a sneak preview of what we thought were some of the key takeaways from the previous 2 sessions, but we wanted to give a more generic or a more in-depth overview of some of these takeaways. So as was mentioned in the first session that was hosted by Anna, Scope 3 decarbonization is a challenge for everyone, regardless of what industry you belong to, what level, what journey you're taking, and what path and what status you're currently at within that journey. And for all of us to be able to overcome these challenges, we need to have coordinated direction in order to be able to accelerate action and really identify those key unlocks that are going to support all of us in driving decarbonization together. And this is exactly what the second takeaway was. So this element around democratizing carbon accounting, we need to make sure that global collaboration is in place so that we can achieve this goal. And of course, that the process, and this was shared in both Tuesday's session and Wednesday's session, this process needs to be standardized so that there's a low entry barrier for suppliers and for companies alike who might be receiving a lot of requests or who will increasingly receive requests from their customers to share this data across value chains. And of course, one of these elements that is essential to democratize carbon accounting is knowledge. And so for that reason, knowledge sharing and being able to provide the means for the suppliers and the SMEs to understand exactly what needs to happen in order for them to really reap the benefits of decarbonization and of this transparency across value chains. We need to be able to really raise the awareness and to share and provide the tools and resources that they need to be able to get to the stage where we will be able to receive the data that we need from them, and for them to be able to also use that data to the best of their abilities to be able to decarbonize their own operations. And then last but not least, one key message that was shared yesterday by Kashnik during the presentation that Schneider Electric did, and that resonated with the panelists, that then also brilliantly shared their own experiences and how they're overcoming some of the challenges around Scope 3, is really to just get started. So we know that the materials and the status quo is not exactly where we want it to be in order for everything to run smoothly. That does not mean that companies should wait for it to be perfect in order to start. We really need to make sure that we get started so that we can learn along the way what are the best ways in which we could be improving, and how can we all work together to improve those key unlocks. And those key barriers. And of course, for that, it's important that whenever we engage with suppliers and with different actors in the value chain, that we understand where these suppliers are on their journeys. And then I didn't want to finish the key takeaways without introducing or providing some highlights of the in-person drinks that were hosted across different cities in Europe yesterday night. We really enjoyed seeing many of you in person, and we were really happy to be able to exchange with you some of these motivations that are driving us to continue working together on this extremely important topic. So as you can see, some of the cities were too busy socializing to really take a group picture of the entire gathering, but we're still really happy to have seen many of you, and we received very positive feedback. So we'll make sure to continue on this process. But with all of these key takeaways in mind, we want to make sure that we dedicate this session to the solutions, really. What are the solutions that are out there that companies are already undertaking to really power decarbonization and supercharge decarbonization? And of course, one of the key elements is data. So we want to start the session by introducing the Partnership for Carbon Transparency's 2023 implementation program and the key actors that have been basically trailblazing in this space to make sure that we manage to operationalize data transparency across value chains. We will then hear from these participants. And of course, that means that we will be hearing from very different types of stakeholders and how they are engaging on this topic. And we will be providing a quiz so that all of you are able to also engage with the different actors and the different approaches or the different unlocks that are needed from many different actors in order for us to jointly tackle this challenge. Then we'll be able to have 10 minutes of Q&A where we'll seek to answer some of your questions. And we will close with a fantastic speaker from CDP, Dexter Gavin, who will be able to wrap up and really bring the overarching industry perspective to really drive this forward. And of course, we will then dedicate the final minutes to close the Scope 3 days with an intervention from our director, Anna Steinle. So with this, I now pass the mic over to Beth, who will be introducing PACT's 2023 implementation program. Over to you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Great to see many of you here today. And for some of you, I know this might be the first session. For many of you, you've been with us through the journey. So we actually wanted to start with hearing from you. As you know, Mentimeter is one of our favorite tools. Love to hear from you. Where is your head at in terms of this question? How critical are suppliers' product carbon footprints to actually driving value chain decarbonization? We've heard a number of different perspectives. We've debated a number of different perspectives. And before we kind of go into a lot of the details and hear some of those perspectives, would love to understand where the audience is at on this question. So you can see, you can scan this QR code, or you can click on the link that Nico just added to the chat. And we're already starting to see some answers. So we're looking to see, across the spectrum, is it not useful? Could it be useful? Would it be useful? Or is it essential? And I think we're already starting to see that perhaps we have started to share the perspective that we feel, of course, it is indeed essential. And I think you'll hear from a number of organizations who also believe it is indeed essential. But for those of you who are thinking it could be useful, would be useful, or maybe it's not useful at all, this session is absolutely for you. And this is absolutely continues to be a really important discussion and dialogue, because at the end of the day, these are all prioritization and trade-off discussions. We know that what we're talking about here is not easy. So we want to move into the next next slide here. So we wanted to introduce in this session what we call the implementation program. And before we get into that, for those of you who might not already be familiar with PACT, I wanted to take some minutes to share with you. Essentially, the Partnership for Carbon Transparency was born several years ago when a number of organizations got together and essentially answered the question that we just saw as critical. They said it is absolutely critical to our business operations to be able to decarbonize our value chain, that we need to prioritize the exchange of product carbon footprint information. And essentially from that was born this initiative called PACT. PACT is working across all of these organizations openly to develop the global standard for calculating and exchanging consistent, comparable, credible Scope 3 emissions data, the product carbon footprints that we talked about. And we work at PACT across all value chains, industry agnostic, allowing essentially any organization to make data-informed, carbon-informed decisions. And the way we've been doing this with all of these organizations is through harmonization of emissions accounting. We have published essentially a rule book, so the methodology with which to assess the product carbon footprint. Of course, this is done in collaboration with many industry initiatives and many of you on this call, because you have the specific expertise of a certain domain, as well as we develop the standard technically to exchange this data across any technical system. And then finally, and I think you've gotten the point, I continue to say it, this is an open project, so it is core to what we do that we are convening and we are collaborating across organizations, corporates, nonprofits, industry initiatives. Really, anyone who has something to say in this space is welcome to contribute and be involved in the standard making process. So that was the history a bit of PACT. What does it actually look like in practice? And actually the title of this is all about less talk, more data. And this image, I think, makes that point, is it's all about data exchange. It's the concept of digitizing your value chain so that you can exchange product carbon footprint information deep into the value chain. So you have this transparency, you can access product level emissions data to identify hotspots. I mentioned this earlier, but the concept of PACT allows you to freely choose what technology solution you essentially want to use to exchange data per the standard. And by doing so, you have full control, full ownership over your data and who you share it with, because it's a peer-to-peer network. As you see here, there's no central platform, for example, through which any of this data passes. So that's a little bit of the backstory of PACT. And with that, I will pass it over to Cecilia to share a little bit more now of where we are and the implementation program.
Thank you very much, Beth. So as Beth introduced, we believe that we now have the foundations that are necessary for data transparency in place. And we need to move to the next stage, which is really to operationalize the data exchange, to have actors from different value chains starting to calculate these PCFs in line with the Pathfinder framework, with these common rules of the games, and to exchange the data using a common language, which is what the technical specifications provide. And what we believe operationalization will achieve is, of course, that it will integrate the ecosystem more closely, and via these continuous feedback loops and essentially, as Beth mentioned, collaboration, we'll be able to continuously improve on this product, right? On this exchange and on the rules that have been established and the infrastructure that has been developed, so that we can gradually expand the number of involved stakeholders. But we really believe that we're at a stage now where we need to start using these materials and operationalize data exchange and, of course, the calculation of the product carbon footprints. And so for this purpose, we kick off, and this is the official launch of the 2023 implementation program. that PACT has jointly co-developed with 8 lead companies who are engaging with their suppliers to promote the calculation and exchange of product carbon footprints, with over 20 solution providers who are currently developing PACT conform and tech solutions. And this number is continuously increasing, which really reflects this push towards product level data and the need for the tech solutions and the willingness from the tech solutions to speak to one another. Of course, these 8 lead companies, as I mentioned, are engaging their suppliers. So far within the program, we count with over 500 suppliers who have been requested to calculate and exchange their PCFs with the lead companies. And last but not least, we have 5 industry and region specific initiatives who are driving this interoperability of PCF calculation and exchange in their respective sectors, because we understand that for most sectors, if not all sectors, there is a need to cater for the specificities of the particular sector while still retaining alignment with the overarching requirements so that we ensure consistency across value chains. And all of these actors are the ones that are making the exchange of standardized emissions data for products a reality. So first of all, we want to congratulate all of them. But what this means in practice, and we've tried to provide an illustrative visualization of what it actually represents, what we want to achieve with this implementation program is to have these lead companies engaging with their suppliers and using the different industry-specific methodologies, also the industry-agnostic methodologies that have been produced by PACT, in order to then exchange the information via the PACT technology conformance solutions. Of course, what this will unlock is the operationalization, as I mentioned, of real and recurring data, and the ability to then, again, assess and continuously improve the data quality of the product carbon footprints, but also of the underlying methodologies and the system in which the product carbon footprints are being exchanged. All of this is, of course, then going to be able to be packaged and repeated in other sector ecosystems. And the ultimate goal, which we should never forget about when we're talking about data transparency, is that we will be able to enhance the LCAs that companies are undertaking and to enhance the transparency in order to make business decision making for decarbonization much easier, and to help companies understand where they need to be looking at in order to best tackle their own emissions and those of their value chain. But there's one feature that we get a lot of questions about, and it's this tech-enabled exchange, right? And so I'll pass over to Beth, who's been leading the work around technology, so that she can share in a couple of slides what that means for companies and how this is really going to unlock the scaling of data exchange.
Thank you, Cecilia. And I have to say, I've been leading, but it's been a team effort for sure. And a big shout out also to the CNA Foundation for their support on the tech side from the very beginning. So what you just heard is a lot of effort, a lot of work, right? To really be able to share high quality product carbon footprint information. We recognize that technology should be the enabler. It should be the accelerator, as it essentially has been for the past few decades. It will revolutionize this space as well. And the good news is that there are many technology solutions being created as we speak that help on this journey. So all of those actors you saw, the supply chain companies in the previous slide, many of them are starting to work with these companies. And I also saw a question in the chat. Any solution can participate in this program, because these solutions, as they're being created, they go through a process called PACT conformance testing that just validates that they have implemented the standard. And then as you start to work with these solutions, you'll provide feedback. We'll learn more about how the standard has to evolve or the solution has to evolve. And through this kind of competitive nature of the evolution of all of these solutions and the evolution of the standard, we really will get to a point where we can achieve the vision of transparency and ultimately laying the foundation for scaled PCF data exchange. Imagine a world where every company is sharing PCFs just as they share financial data, for example. So I mentioned this previously, but if we move on to the next slide, we wanted to give you a bit of hope. This is a number of the solutions out there that we already know are in the process of building PACT conformant solutions that you can already use. And as part of the implementation program, many of these are being used to exchange the data and even calculate the product carbon footprint data. And we will be releasing soon a website that allows you to access which solutions indeed are conformant. And again, want to acknowledge the CNA Foundation for their generous support and the creation of that website. So stay tuned for that. It's coming out soon on the Carbon Transparency PACT website. So just to wrap things up, because I know you want to hear from the actual participants in this program, just a couple of takeaways. So those organizations who are participating in the implementation scale-up, why are they doing it? What are they getting out of it? What we see is essentially they are advancing their own transparency journey. They are taking the initiative and they know it's not perfect, but they're going for it. And they do this because they know that by aligning to a standard, they are lowering the burden on their suppliers. They have a single ask, and that ask is shared across many, not just the single relationship that they have with the supplier. And ultimately, we hear this time and time again. It's a reason why we're hosting these Scope 3 days. Collaboration is absolutely critical for us to achieve this mission of decarbonization of the value chains. And so therefore, we of course welcome all of you. If you're not already involved in PACT, it's an open standard. Please do reach out and get involved. So without a little bit more details on the program, we wanted to really turn it over to some of the program participants and give you an opportunity to hear from them. And of course, after we hear from each of them, we'll have some Q&A discussion. So feel free to share your questions in the chat as we go. Before I introduce our first speaker, as Cecilia alluded, we will have just a quick quiz. And this kind of helps set the stage for our first speaker. We will first hear from kind of the corporate lens. And you might be asked, the question is, companies with thousands of suppliers and products, should they or should they not focus on product carbon footprints? Is this approach scalable? So we'd love to hear what the thinking in the room is. And then soon we will also hear from a participant what they think on this question. So if we can share. All right. Indeed, great to hear. I think you're foreshadowing well, so that makes my introduction quite easy. It's now my sincere privilege to introduce Francois, who is the climate director at Unilever. And Unilever has absolutely been a tremendous partner in PACT since the very beginning, and frankly, just really want to recognize the work that they have been doing to help inform the standard over time. So Francois, over to you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Cecilia. Hello, everyone. So let's start by defining scale. For us at Unilever, scale goes hand in hand with materiality, in that sense that we have 56,000 suppliers, but we've identified the top 300 suppliers that represent 70% of our footprint. And within these top 300, we've broken that down per key portfolios, such as petrochemicals, inorganics, palm, tropical oils, packaging, and dairy, who are really our priority focus in order to engage our suppliers. Secondly, we've taken a cluster approach, a segmented approach to these top 300. So the top 300, we've clustered them in function of their climate maturity. And there again, we need to become specific because 20% of these top 300 are already what we call climate leaders, aligned to SBTi. And for them, developing a product carbon footprint and sharing that is not necessarily an issue. There are some standardization and exchange opportunities to streamline, but PCF is already part of their culture. 40% of these top 300 are what we call climate learners. So for them, PCF is not obvious, but there is a big willingness to learn and a big appreciation of us helping them to develop that capability inside their company. And then 40% of these top 300 are what we call climate beginners. And for them, indeed, PCF is very complex. They are at the start of their journey. They are still looking at even tackling their own operations footprint. And it's very much a conversation around cost savings and energy efficiencies. So on the climate journey, that's how we see this. Moving from a product carbon footprint calculation towards a product carbon footprint calculation is inevitable. It is part of the climate maturity journey, and therefore, the sooner you start, the sooner you can start building advantage out of this. That's my third point. PCF and LCA for us at Unilever has been the foundation of how to leverage carbon insights for innovation and competitive advantage, and for new product developments that shifts our portfolio towards lower carbon alternatives, whether it's in ice cream moving towards vegan ice cream, or in our cleaning products moving towards renewable chemicals. PCF and LCA is the basis for R&D, and that's really a fundamental value added that you can as well offer to your suppliers as they progress towards LCA. Final point is that implementation partners are key for scale. Of course, we cannot do this alone. We have identified key implementation partners for each of these different suppliers on their way towards the climate maturity. For the climate beginners, we work with M2030. For the climate learners, we work with EcoChain. For the climate leaders, we work with PACT and WBCSD, because we have heard from the climate leaders that standardization of this data exchange is fundamental. And that's also why we appreciate so much working with PACT and with WBCSD on this journey. How we look at the future long-term is that ultimately, carbon should become a fundamental part of the job description of a procurement managers. If tomorrow a procurement manager looks at carbon in the same way that they look at quality specifications of products and engage on carbon in the same way that they engage on service and price, that would be a critical factor for success. We're not there yet. It will take some time, but I really think that's going to be the leadership edge of this next decade. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francois. Great insights. Now I'd like to pass it over to the tech side of things. And before I do, again, a quick quiz. Let's see how much you were paying attention earlier. So true or false, any solution that is PACT conformant can exchange data with any other solution that is also PACT conformant. Let's see what we think. I've also been getting a lot of questions in the chat. I can just answer any solution indeed can become PACT conformant. So does indeed look like the answer indeed is true. And I think who better to share more about this than Sebastian Steinhauser from SAP, Chief Strategy Officer, and someone SAP has been involved in PACT from the very beginning. PACT wouldn't be what it is without their support. So happy to pass it over to you, Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you, Beth and Cecilia. Nice to see you again, by the way. And true, I think you couldn't have said it better also, Francois. At SAP, we fundamentally believe that the only way to massive decarbonization at scale is that it needs to be enabled by the product level calculation and sharing of carbon footprints. That's, to us, the core belief. We believe that only then, like Francois, you said it, when the business decision maker is able at the level where the decision is made and the point where a decision is made in the process, when they have the carbon data at their fingertips, like you said it, Beth, like the financial data, that's to us the true moonshot that we are going after here all together to unlock what I believe can be the biggest unlock to decarbonization from the digital side. I was just, for example, with one of the largest companies in the world earlier today, and the biggest single question they have for their billions of spend, how to manage scope 3 emissions. And they immediately agreed, starting with the top 100 suppliers, maybe then the top 1,000, that they want to request product level carbon footprints compliant to the PACT framework. Finally, a global standard that everybody hopefully agrees on. And the more agree, the better it works, right? It's a true data network, so there's true scale effect. So for us, I mean, you might know SAP touches about 90% of the world's financial and goods flows, with that about 90% of the world's carbon flows as well. We really want to play our part, but we don't want to define the standards. We want you to do that from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We fully subscribe to the PACT framework. We are actually launching next week at our biggest annual user conference, Sapphire, a sustainability data exchange service that is leveraging the PACT framework. It will be announced by our CEO live on stage. That is coming at a very low cost, because we believe this is so critical. And then I think the second thing where we spend a lot of time on, which is much harder, is to enable the product level calculation at scale in an automated fashion. But the ultimate goal for us is really that we can treat carbon data in sync with financial data, so that a business decision maker, like a procurement person making an individual purchasing decision, has carbon data next to the financial data, that a business traveler making a travel decision has carbon data next to financial data and time when making a trade-off between taking a plane or a train, and that a controller making a multi-billion-dollar green investment decision on a green steel plant can see the carbon impact next to the financial impact. So we are super excited, and with that, back to you.
Thank you, Sebastian. And I know we've been saying, and you've been saying, treat carbon like money.
Yes.
Thanks for making that.
Oh, and I should have mentioned, I mean, I think we've had an amazing publication together. We are true believers. For us, it's the biggest moonshot we are driving at SAP right now.
Fantastic.
Thank you for the partnership.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. And we also wanted to have another perspective also from an organization that has been with PACT since the beginning, and also PACT wouldn't be the same without their support. So would love to introduce Gunther Walden, founder and CEO of Circular Tree.
Yes, thank you very much, Beth. Yeah, what I want to bring in is really this perspective of a solution provider who is really focusing also on the supplier side of the organization. So if you imagine you're a supplier to several large OEMs, and all the OEMs come to you with a solution or with a questionnaire which is different from each other, then it's very, very difficult for you to answer all of those requests. And that is when you go into a point where you're saying, I cannot answer this. So for us, the key perspective is that we want to provide one solution to suppliers where they can answer all requests from their customers with a click on the mouse button, and then transfer the requested product carbon footprint to their customers. And I think what has been achieved in the PACT has really been great. We have done a number of interoperable solutions with supply chain actors. So we have, in those pilot projects, we have proven that all of this works. The methodological framework was published. I think we've heard it from many customers that they want to make sure that there are apples being compared with apples and not apples with bananas. So really having a methodological framework which ensures comparability of calculation has been key, in our opinion, to the acceptance. And certainly for us as a solution provider, technical standards have been published, and that is key to really make sure that one solution can talk to another solution, and companies are not requested to have multiple solutions to answer different customer requests. And I'm really happy to say that PACT conformance solutions are available right now. And I'm especially happy to say that we at Circular Tree have a PACT conformance solution. If we can go to the next slide, please. And that is my key message. So much has been said already in the last two meetings from Kanish from Schneider Electric, for example. We now need to start. And my message to you is everything is now ready for a kickoff. What we have done is we have really tried to make it very easy with onboarding, easy to use. We want to have a solution which you want to use and not have to use. I think it's important to easily reach out to your suppliers or to send answers to your customers. One of the key aspects is if you have many suppliers, then you need to receive data in a structured way. It is very cumbersome and error prone if you start working with Excel sheets or any other means of exchanging data. And once you have the transparency, then you can start talking with your suppliers and you can start setting targets and you can really start decarbonizing the supply chain. So for us, it's been really a great journey. It's been more than 2.5 years of work with very passionate people, be it solution providers, be it supply chain actors or other stakeholders. And I think we've really achieved something great. And I'm absolutely thrilled that today we're kicking off this now to really start the implementation. And yeah, whenever you have any question, call us or any other PACT solution provider. I think we're all ready and eager to start. Thank you, Beth.
Well, thank you, Gunther. Message, I hope, is loud and clear. Let's get started. So with that, I would love to now introduce another perspective. As you've heard, collaboration is critical, and we work very closely with industry-specific initiatives. So before I introduce our last speaker of the panel, true or false? The PACT standard is industry agnostic and therefore prevents exchange of industry-specific data and requirements. And I must say, this might be the trickiest of all of our questions. So think about this one. As expected, it's a tricky one. All right, I must say, indeed, the PACT standard is industry agnostic. That part is correct. However, and you'll hear a little bit probably about this from our next speaker, the standard itself absolutely does allow the exchange of industry-specific data and requirements, and that's exactly why we work so closely with industry initiatives to ensure harmonization and alignment. So I'm very pleased now to introduce John McGrath. He's a technical product director at RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute. He woke up today at probably less than before 6 a.m. So very, very glad, John, that you could make it and very much appreciate the work that we're doing with you. Would love to hear more from you and how your members are engaging.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, that was a trick question. And so you're all right. Everybody gets an A. By itself, what we all think of as the core PACT standard defines high-level data exchange and is not, in fact, industry specific. But in the wisdom, the architects of this, and speaking of WBCSD and also the CENA Foundation, which I was glad you acknowledged earlier because we've really enjoyed working with them too, in your wisdom have made the standard extensible. So third parties like ourselves are able to create extensions of the format that do define industry-specific fields. You know, it obviously would be impossible for any one entity to define, you know, descriptors for the entire economy. But if you have expertise in steel, aluminum, sustainable aviation fuel, or petrochemicals, just to name a few that where RMI has industry expertise, you can apply that knowledge. The way we're doing this is that we have been developing accounting standards for specific industries. We started with steel. We're rolling out aluminum now. And when we joined PACT, we had been considering doing this essentially on our own a few years ago, creating these formats. And we immediately, you know, attached our wagon to this star. And we are developing these extensions that are PACT conformant but define the additional fields that are industry specific. So rather than just saying, here's the high level number for this batch of steel, you can also say, and these are the constituent numbers for these aspects that are specific to steel, and exchange that. So one question I've frequently gotten about that as well, is that the standard then? Because you have, what if lots of people are creating competing extensions? Happily, there is a market or a catalog, I think might be a better term for it, that I know is part of the plans of WBCSD. And we work closely to make sure we're so philosophically aligned. And also, I think what this is allowing is not just standardization, but also an element of experimentation. So as we need to transfer new kinds of data, it's relatively easy to create extensions for purpose and engage in that kind of experimentation. So we have these extensions available. We had done steel and aluminum separately and realized there were so many commonalities that there is now, we've created what we're calling a metals extension that supports both of those. We have internally an extension for sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, defining its qualities. What we've been doing with these, we've been running pilots of our methodologies, and we're having phase 2 pilots with those groups where we're engaging in the data exchange portion. As folks have mentioned earlier, we sort of meet people where they are. Not everybody is ready to build a machine-to-machine automated system involving APIs on both sides. Everyone does seem to recognize the desirability of that. So in some cases, we're exchanging PACT conformant spreadsheets. I'm sure some people are shuddering hearing that, but it's a step toward the light. But in others, we're working with them to do proper machine-to-machine communication in PACT conformant manners. And the point we're at now is to try to move past the world of pilots. I've heard this a lot too, and into fully productionized systems where this is used day to day in a widespread scaled way. But we're seeing that people want to do that, and I think I know WBCSD is you're living there, and the companies with which we're working will be there soon enough. So thanks, and back to you, Beth.
Fantastic, John. Absolutely. And it sounds like the message is also reaching loud and clear. Just get started. Just move the data. And frankly, I must say, if it's a spreadsheet at first, it's a spreadsheet. It's going to be productionized at some point. So just get started is a great message. So with that, I want to thank everyone for those impulses and really appreciate all of the dialogue going on in the Q&A. With that, we'll pass over to Cecilia and we'll do this live Q&A, and please keep the questions coming.
Thank you very much, Beth. And if we could spotlight the different speakers who have just shared with us their incredible insights and hopefully motivated everyone joining this call around the topic of data transparency, about the fact that it's feasible if we all work together, and really the excitement that we are all feeling across the board about this ability to exchange data. So maybe starting with Francois and the corporate perspective, there was a question on the chat about the difficulty and how challenging it is sometimes for companies to collect the data and to really drive this accuracy from a technical perspective. And we were wondering, maybe as Unilever, I think you alluded to the different ways in which you're engaging with the different suppliers depending on how mature they are. But are you seeing, is there anything that you would like to share with companies who might be thinking of getting started on this process and who might be struggling a bit with this challenge?
Yes, so a couple of learnings from our program launch. First of all, we know that many suppliers really are challenged by these requests. So it's not a quick fix. It's not necessarily easy, but with the right infrastructure in place, so we're working with external partners that also help us with the PMO of this program. You can actually help them very concretely, and what we see and the feedback that we receive is that not only do they appreciate the capability building and the kind of hand-holding process that we are helping them to go through, but that then also helps them to drive new leadership conversations within their own organization. That helps them to elevate some of the requests to their leadership teams about the need to hire new types of skills and capabilities within their organization. That helps them to bring the conversation around carbon and net zero at the level of the leadership team where it needs to be. And so there's a trickle effect that is happening. So we have only a small team within Unilever to do this, but we have external partners that help us do the PMO, which is very, very important.
Thank you. And I think that alludes back to what you were saying in your info speech around, for instance, potentially linking carbon as a key requirement for procurement and making sure that the procurement team is able to understand what is being requested from them. So I think I completely agree with you on that front. And maybe in a similar fashion, but more on the technology side of things and for the solution providers that are currently working in this space. So of course, the question is more directed to Sebastian and Günther. There's a question on the chat around how you as solution providers can support companies in understanding where they should be, kind of what bridges they should be building with what solution providers, and what is the role of you as the technology providers in creating those bridges across the different technologies that currently exist. Because of course, you know, it seems that within this space, we're moving away from a market where everyone was trying to get as many as many companies as possible into their solution, to a market where the key will be for you to be able to communicate with as many solutions as possible. So how are you tackling that internally within your organizations? Maybe we'll start with Sebastian and then we'll get Günther to also react on it.
Yeah, look, and that's a great question, because there's a great proliferation also of solutions out there. For us at SAP, first of all, it's clear for us it will be a team sport. So actually, we don't want to compete on sustainability. It's something we need to solve as a team, as the whole economy and society. And that's, to me, why a common standard like PACT is so important, because if I think I want to provide companies like Unilever the best software solution, I don't want to compete with any vendor on interpreting or setting standards. Mm-hmm. And that's why for us, I think a common global standard like PACT, that's the key that's needed to unlock this at scale, so that we compete with others in our ecosystem on providing the best user experience, the best automation at the best cost, but don't compete on, well, who better hits the taste of a specific industry on how they want to report their carbon data. That's something where I'm a big believer in, and why we are such a big believer in the PACT framework, and actually collaborate with, I mean, you saw on the slide you showed, there were logos of almost every large IT player out there, and we are super happy to collaborate with you and our peers in the industry, to make sure we steer to one common solution based on one common data model. That to us is key. Günther.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think I can definitely fully agree with what Sebastian has said. I mean, the calculation standards and the communication standards are then not negotiable. I mean, that is something where we cannot compete. That has to be ensured. Otherwise, we will not gain acceptance. And if we don't have acceptance, we will not be able to scale. So absolutely 100% in agreement on that. Maybe on top of that, what I might say is probably every solution provider within his user interface might have a different focus on customer targets groups. And I think that is a good thing, because that provides the supply chain actors an opportunity to really look at different solutions, and then in the end select the solution which they might think is most suitable to their specific needs. And that can be what we've discussed about certain adoptions into industry-specific standards as an add-on. or any other things about usability, what is the user concept of the software, and that is the area I think where we can really compete, and that is a good thing, because that will in the end make us all better. That's a good thing for the supply chain actors. This competition in that area will make their life easier and every solution better.
Thank you so much both for your reflections. And I think maybe as a follow-up question, there seems to be a shared sentiment from companies that they want to avoid or minimize as much as possible the burden that they're creating on suppliers by asking them to share this data from different platforms, or having suppliers share this data to different platforms. So I think what you are currently committing to or communicating is extremely encouraging for them, because it essentially says, you know, we will collaborate to make sure that the process is as smooth as possible, and that if you have one request, it's just automatically shared with the different platforms. So I think that's really encouraging, at least from my perspective, to hear. And maybe to turn to John as well on the industry perspective. I think one of the key concerns that we have is that as we move towards catering for this specificity that some sectors might need, how do you then make sure that you continue to be aligned with the overarching requirements that all of these solution providers are working towards, standardizing the language? How do you make sure that, you know, regardless of ensuring further consistency and specificity, you still maintain the harmonization? How is RMI dealing with this particular challenge?
For sure. Well, when you define an extension, you definitely, you know, the entire rest of the data structure has to be tied to a specific version of the PACT standard, and we did stay abreast of it. You know, the documentation is extremely good. WBCSD and CNA Foundation have been extremely responsive. So the extended formats have to take the same sort of like software craft care as any other kind of participant in a software ecosystem. The versioning has been very good. So like they not to drift too much into the technical, but there is a framework for extensibility that has been developed. So in addition to creating, first you create the extensibility framework, then you create the extension. That extensibility framework is stable and high quality and allows the creation of the extension. So we stay conformant to the PACT core standard. We carefully follow the extensibility guidelines. Then after that, it's our responsibility to produce stable data standards and communicate good versioning practices and things like these, which, you know, we make great effort to do. So, I mean, in practice, everybody has some responsibility in this kind of an ecosystem where you're going to have lots of different extensions for lots of different kinds of data. I'll also say that we are eager to work with ISVs and software vendors so that if they adopt sort of, I'll say, further depth of the PACT format, specific industry solutions, we remain synchronized. We can support them not just in a technical sense, but also, you know, there needs to be methodology behind all this. If you're comparing two batches of steel, you know, something as basic as, you know, are you using the same units, but also is your definition of sinter the same? Like, are you, the way you're measuring energy and electricity inputs, are those comparable? So there's a bunch of factors here. It's not that it's easy, but it's so much easier when you have these common standards and these bodies through which to interact as well.
Thank you so much. And I think you alluded to the standardization, which is considered a key element, right, to making this whole thing possible. And maybe to allow everyone to have share some final thoughts on the way forward and what are some of the next steps, we would love to hear from you as well on where do we go next. So, right, we've heard from the industry initiative perspective that we are indeed able to keep consistency whilst catering for specificity. We've heard from the solution providers that even though you might get requests from many different platforms, you will be able to do this in a very streamlined and smooth way that will require very minimum effort because they will be speaking the same language. And we've heard from Francois and the corporate sector that you're able to actually scale this and get as many suppliers on board as long as you're able to understand where they currently sit in their journeys and that you're able to cater that engagement based on their level of maturity and their what their needs are essentially. So I think all of this, at least in my perspective, is extremely positive. It demonstrates that we already have the solutions, that we're already implementing the solutions. And really for us, the implementation program is a result of all the hard work that has been done by industry initiatives, by corporates, and by solution providers. So maybe some final words from all of you on where you think this is going and what you think the next big thing will be, and maybe starting with Sebastian, because I just saw you unmuted yourself, and to not follow any particular order.
I have only one wish: massive global adoption of the PACT framework. I think, and with that, solving the Scope 3 challenge for good.
I will definitely agree with that wish. I will let maybe François, since you're already on mute, go next.
Yeah, listen, I think there's quite a challenge in front of us, because climate accounting, by its nature and by its level of maturity right now, is having a lot of uncertainty and a lot of volatility in it. Mm-hmm. And so I completely agree on the need and the vision that climate accounting, carbon accounting should have over time the same standards as financial accounting, the same rigor, the same auditing, measurement, reporting, verification, you name it. So we will see, I'm sure of that, an incredible fast maturing of this scene in the next years, because what I see is that some of the volatility that comes from changes in methodology, changes in emission factor, when you move from global average emission factors to regional emission factors to local emission factors and then to supplier specific emission factors, that level of variance, that level of volatility can be massive. And sometimes that variance is actually higher than the carbon reduction that you can drive through real initiatives and product innovations. And that's a big challenge, because we need to be able to articulate to our leadership team, to our suppliers, to our investors, what is driven by real reduction programs versus what is just a function of changes in methodology. So there will be a level of uncertainty and volatility that we will need to manage in the next years, which is inevitable in the growing space of a new industry. But obviously elevating the standards, driving standardization, scaling up adoption of similar logics as fast as we can and as wide as we can. It's a fundamental necessary stepping stone in the development of this industry.
Thank you, François. And I think for that, I really like the notion that Sebastian shared about this being a team sport. So I think everyone will hopefully be able to work together to limit that volatility as much as possible in the coming years, because it's definitely one of the factors that we'll need to take into account as we continue to mature this space. Maybe over to Gunther, since you've unmuted yourself as well.
Yes, thank you. Fully agree. What I really do hope that we all feel the sense of urgency to start. I mean, make no mistake, getting the transparency is only the first step and probably the easiest one. Really getting beyond tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on is a long journey. And the later we start, the longer it is going to take. So I really see that we must start in order to meet our commitments. Especially those of the large corporations who have net zero commitments. It might seem like a long time, but if you really look at it, I think it is not that long. And supply chains tend to be very complex often. And I think, as Kanish has said it yesterday, it might not everything be 100% perfect, but it is definitely in a state where we can start. And I think it's for us, and probably the same for all other solution providers. We're all eager to learn from the feedback we're getting from the users and make things better and better as we go along. But the first step has been taken, and thank you to the WBCSD team.
Thank you, Gunther. And then last but not least, we turn over to John for some final words from the industry perspective, industry initiative perspective?
I'll keep these brief. It's use software. We've spoken with so many companies who they're from the world where they're emailing many of them spreadsheets around, and this notion that like, oh, let's keep doing it in sort of some cobbled together fashion, it comes up. And, you know, would you do that with your financials? You know, probably not. So employing carbon accounting systems of various sorts, or utilizing the emerging number of solutions within ERP systems to do this in an automated way, you know, is the path forward. And that's the kind of conversation we're having with a lot of people we talk to. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. Losing my voice, even though you guys have done most of the speaking, but I want to thank all of you because you've provided some really key insights for us to really communicate to all of the attendees, and hopefully this will also serve Dexter Gavin, who's going to be providing the closing remarks from the industry, and which hopefully has been very motivated by the discussions and by what's been shared so far today. Over to you, Gavin. Dexter, sorry.
Thanks, Cecilia. I just wanted to say very quickly, massive thanks to you guys at the WBCSD for the incredible work that you're doing here. It's absolutely vital that we get a handle on this. So I'm really delighted to see the sorts of groups that you're convening and the types of work that you're doing to standardize the topic. So thank you so much for that. It was a real pleasure to hear the last discussion in particular. I know that you've been running these Scope 3 days, and it seems like you've had a lot of success and really fabulous engagement from a lot of key people. But for me, it was a walk down memory lane a bit to hear Unilever talking about their work on product carbon footprint, because I know when I started at CDP, we were starting our supply chain program, which I helped to kick off back in 2008. And I had many a conversation with Unilever about their LCA approach. And I thought they were mad going through all of this incredibly detailed information at the time. And we were pushing the importance of company level reporting. But it informed such an incredible transformation of their business. And what we heard today was the detailed decision-making that it's informed around, from things like ice cream to shampoo, you know. So this level of data is so important for decision-making in a really practical sense. And hopefully now the world has woken up to the importance of this level of granularity of carbon emissions data. So I'm excited to see a lot of other organizations follow in Unilever's footprints, and incredible to see organizations like SAP, really struck by the fact that 90% of carbon flows are touched in some way by SAP. So incredible power and scale to drive change. So taking the lead of one of their key customers like Unilever and really taking that to the market and spreading it out wider. And I think that's the kind of watchword of today, is going to scale. Really taking the learning that some key industry leaders have and really taking it out into the market. And that's what we've believed at CDP for a very long time. That's so important. And then to see Circular Tree and RMI and the solutions that they have in place, particularly the need to go down to sector-specific level data, is really important to drive the type of change that we need. Of course, we know that individual industry sectors need a slightly different skew on the data, and you guys have reflected that in the PACT standard very elegantly, I might add. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do to adopt these standards. If I think back to when we started the supply chain program, we were very much focused on company level reporting, because it simply wasn't the case that the vast majority of companies were actually able to calculate their company level data. So we really pushed that at CDP. But in recent years, we've seen the need to really get back into driving product level disclosure. We've always asked for it. So for the past 15 years, we've actually asked for carbon emissions breakdown over the life cycle of products. But in 2022, for example, only 2% of responding suppliers were able to provide that sort of data. So it's clear that there's a massive amount of work to do, and it's incredible to see all of the solutions providers together here working in a collaborative way to find a meaningful solution so that we don't have the same problem that we had in the company level reporting space, where so much duplication emerged with different calculation methodologies, different reporting standards. If we were to follow the same development path in the product level data space, we would simply grind to a halt from massive divergence in reporting standards. It would mean huge amounts of effort on the part of suppliers trying to meet different reporting requirements, and that would be utterly unacceptable. So we can't allow that to happen. We at CDP have been very involved in the PACT work and the Pathfinder methodologies, and we are fully embracing all of this. So one of the key things I want to announce today is that CDP will align to the PACT framework. So companies will be able to report into CDP via this framework. You'll be able to use our product ecosystem or any of the solutions providers that you have here. And we will ensure that you can report that data through your CDP disclosure and use that as a repository to push the data out to your various requesting authorities or your investors, as the case may be. Actually, we've been launching a supplier financing project as part of our supply chain program recently. And a lot of the big banks are very interested in the breakdown of carbon emissions over the life cycle of products and are certainly very keen to see that level of granularity from companies. So it will not only improve your B2B relationships, but may massively decrease the cost of capital for you, which could be an incredible opportunity as we move forward. So I just want to say CDP is fully behind this work. We're fully aligning to the PACT standards. We're redeveloping our, we're going through a digital transformation now. So we're redeveloping our reporting platform over the course of the next year. And that means that we will be able to build all of these reporting new reporting standards into the platform so that it will be easy for companies just to export that information through their CDP disclosure. So it's a really important development. And I think if I reflect back to the early days of the Scope 3 standard development, we had the quite elegant approach of a company level disclosure standard and a product level disclosure standard. And I think that three-dimensional view is actually really important when we start thinking about a company's supply chain. And if you can not pursue absolute perfect data, but make sure that you can identify where this information can drive interventions that can actually reduce emissions. That's the key thing. And that's what you've heard so elegantly from Unilever at the very beginning, that this information isn't just data for data's sake. It's data to drive meaningful action. And if you can start to drive that type of action across your product portfolio, then we can have an opportunity to reduce emissions by 50% over the next 7 years. It's possible, it's an opportunity, but it's an opportunity that we have to grasp, and we have to take every possible means at our disposal to do that. And this PACT framework allows us not to reinvent the wheel, not to duplicate effort, and to focus effort in the right place and get all of the different stakeholders in the market focusing on one standard and one standard alone. And that means then we can take that to the policymakers and ensure that they're not reinventing the wheel, and we can work with this wonderful framework to really drive the action necessary to change the world. So thank you very much, and thank you to the WBCSD team.
And actually, I think we have you to thank. Thank you very much, Dexter, for the phenomenal feedback, but also this announcement. Of course, we are absolutely thrilled to share this with the world. As you might expect, we get this question a lot, and it's really exciting to be working towards the technical alignment with CDP. So thank you very much for sharing that today. And with that, we are already at the end of our hour. I hope you're as inspired and excited as I am. And with that, I'm very, very pleased to pass it back over to our amazing leader, Anna, who has, honestly, these Scope 3 days were her initiative. And I think all of us have seen how much energy and enthusiasm they have created. So thank you, Anna, also for that. And over to you.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, team. This has been such a joy to watch. I've really, really enjoyed today's discussions. I loved watching yesterday's discussion. And above all, I was quite happy I didn't have to moderate them because, you know, it gives me a good break to actually listen and learn and not have to sort of focus on chat and all these other things. But, you know, great discussion. I really, really like that final bit that you said there, Dexter, the data to drive meaningful action. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. There's a lot of people who are sort of probably wondering, you know, there's all this information and sort of all this excitement. What can I actually do next? How do you get started? And I think the key thing is get started. You know, just do it. Get started. Don't think about it too long. Don't try to be perfect. Don't try to understand all the different things. Just slowly get started. Reach out to some of the people who've been on the call here today, or other people you know in your networks, to understand what they are doing, how they're doing, how they can help you. You know, start calculating those data points for maybe your biggest product, you know, and bit by bit, really see this not as a sort of, it's a journey. We know this is complex, but the outcome, then the sort of information that you can get, what you can do with this information is really going to be worth it. And I think as has come through in the last couple of days, the world is moving in this direction, and over time you will be required to do this by your suppliers, by regulators and others. So it's better to get ahead of the train as fast as you can. Of course, feel free to engage with us and all the other, you know, excellent industry initiatives out there that are doing work in this space. Understand what role you can play, on the one hand, in driving forward progress by doing this, but also in shaping some of the things and some of the work that's still being done in this space. And then if you are from the tech provider community, get PACT conformant. You know, we heard it just now. It's really important to make sure that there's not one platform that does it all, but there's collaboration between the different tech players. And we have some really, really core tech players in this space actually starting to collaborate. It's quite, you know, I really find it quite impressive to see. You know, it's encouraging that we can sort of take that step beyond and realize that this is not where we need to compete. This is where we need to collaborate. This is where we need radical collaboration and really to work together to ensure that we help everyone and make sure that we've got the tools to tackle the Scope 3 challenge. So thank you so much to all of you for joining here today. As we said on the chat, you can watch the recordings. We've uploaded the first 2 recordings on our YouTube channel already. The 3rd recording will follow, and we'll also follow up with some information via email to everyone who's registered. Keep the conversation going. We are going to be doing big events like this in the course of the next sort of, throughout the next sort of 6 months in all the big spaces where you'd expect us to be: Climate Week, COP, Davos, and then some. And of course, if you have any questions, do always reach out to us on pact@wbcsd.org or visit our website, carbon-transparency.com. So thank you to all of you for joining us here today. Thank you to the excellent team for organizing not just a fantastic 3-day event, but also very fun networking sessions yesterday. We had a blast here in Paris, and the diversity of people coming together in this community is really, really great. So make sure you keep those conversations going. And above all, see you soon. Thank you so much to all the speakers, and take care.